Welcome to Raising the Bar with RebuttalPR, the podcast where we elevate the stories of the plaintiff's bar and dive into the key trends shaping the civil justice system today. I'm your host, Ray DiLorenzi, and in each episode, we'll bring you insightful interviews with leading attorneys, expert perspectives on current legal events, and in-depth discussions on the issues that matter most. Now let's jump in. There's clearly a problem with the media business and the news business, but that does not mean that there's necessarily a problem with a dearth of information. There's more ways to get information than ever, and how people are talking about you or your law firm, you have to be more ubiquitous. Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Raising the Bar with RebuttalPR. I'm your host, Ray DiLorenzi, and today I'm actually not really going to be the host. For those of you who are familiar with the program, we typically have really amazing, legendary plaintiffs' lawyers on to discuss their cases and their careers. Today, my colleagues forced me essentially to do an episode where my wonderful friend and colleague, Hannah Gallagher, who's here with me, is, and also she's our in-house podcast expert. She is going to ask me questions that we have received from listeners and clients and get my takes on them. Hannah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you. This is very exciting. I am an avid podcast listener and now host/guest. So yeah, we've received lots of comments and internally we know Ray has some really hot takes. So I want to hear some of those and talk a little bit about PR and media and the legal world. So excited.
Hannah, I brought, I don't know if folks will be able to see this. I have this little trophy and I received it at our annual holiday party in December. And everyone got like a different trophy for something. And mine was most likely to have a piping hot take. So
Which
I feel like this is right. I do. So this is right on my wheelhouse. I am not short of opinions. And, you know, I tell it like it is. Nothing here will be filtered. So, Hannah, let me have it.
I have some hot takes too, so we can talk about them.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, I guess I'll take over my host role. Before we get into those hot takes, Ray, you want to just tell us a little bit about where Rebuttal came from in the first place and how you got into the legal PR world? It's kind of niche, so
Sure. I will try to give the short version of the story. I used to live in Washington, D.C. I now live in the New York City suburbs in North Jersey. But when I lived in D.C., I was doing some political work, and then I ended up at the American Association for Justice, and I was communications director there from 2008 to 2012. For those of you who are not familiar with AAJ, first, if you're a trial lawyer, plaintiff civil lawyer, and not a member of AAJ, you need to be a member of AAJ. They're the largest membership organization for plaintiffs lawyers. They do amazing work on Capitol Hill to protect your practice, amazing education events. We will be at AAJ's annual convention, which by the time this airs, it'll be early January. I think it'll air right before that in San Francisco. AAJ is a tremendous organization, but I got to be communications director there, and that's where I got to learn about our civil justice system, the plaintiff's bar, and meet a lot of great plaintiffs lawyers. I left AAJ in 2012, and fast forward 8 years, I decided when the pandemic hit and an existential crisis hit, like it did for many people, to start Rebuttal, to focus on strictly working for the plaintiff's bar and helping them with their cases and their practices from a public relations and communications perspective. And now we have an amazing team of about 24 people from coast to coast, including you, Hannah. So here you are.
Love it. Yeah. Exciting. Yeah. I mean, Rebuttal's awesome. I've been here for a couple of years and it's a really fun field to be part of. So love it. Well, let's hop into some of our hot takes. I think right now in the world, the news is bombarded with political news and there's always a lot going on, but there's also legal news and that's obviously what we're focused on. Can you kind of give us your thought on what counts as news in 2025? How do people get coverage? What's important? How do law firms get in the news if that's one of their goals?
Yeah. I think, and this has always been the case, but I think it's been more exacerbated more recently, but news should be thought of as information. And you shouldn't think, where do people get their news? Where do they get their information? Think about I think imagine like when I was a kid and like my mom would come home and tell my dad or vice versa, oh, did you hear the news?
Mm.
Okay. And it was some like in-town gossip. It wasn't something that was going to be on like NBC Nightly News. But people don't think of news as, oh, I saw this on broadcast news television. It's new information that they receive.
Mm.
And the difference now compared to like when I was younger versus now, and as just time has gone on, is there are more places to get information than ever.
Mm.
There's clearly a problem with the media business and the news business.
Mm.
But that does not mean that there's necessarily a problem with a dearth of information. There's more ways to get information than ever. And how people are talking about you or your law firm, you have to be more ubiquitous. You have to be in a lot more places. And people, there was a time when there were lawyers who just do billboards, or some that would just only do radio or only do TV. Now, you can have a practice that specializes in a certain area and not do TV, billboard, or radio. You have to find what your core audience is, where that core audience gets that information, and then really target that core audience, their information bases, in order to reach them. So that's my view of how, again, I think news, that term is loaded and a misnomer when you really have to think about the information environment.
Yeah. I mean, on the kind of flip side of that, I know I've heard you talk about how settlements and verdicts with their numbers alone, that's not news. And, just publishing your big number anywhere and not explaining what the case is, that's not necessarily news. So can you explain that a little bit more? What makes a verdict or a settlement or a case newsworthy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, not to get into politics, but like right now, Congress is debating the BBB, big beautiful bill. I forget what I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
And this bill, is estimated to cost trillions of dollars. I'm not getting into the merits or politics of it, but the idea that anyone at this point understands the difference between hundreds of millions and billions and trillions is just zeros, and like the numbers wash over people. There's no real understanding anymore of what all that means. And I think this really started with the financial crisis when they were, doing bailouts of banks. Again, I'm not saying whether getting into the wisdom of those things, but it cost hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, and people were just that's a lot of money. But what does that make? So going back to your original question, every law firm talks about its verdicts. Okay, 5 million, 6 million, 10 million, 20 million. Okay, but what does that leave the person on the other end to think? Oh, they had a $10 million verdict. What if it was a $20 million case? I don't know. Mm-hmm. And people aren't, look, there's a certain segment of the population that wants to go with a law firm maybe bigger is better, or one that promises a quicker resolution. But people have always been and are currently driven by stories. They want a story to be told. And saying you got a $20 million verdict doesn't tell a story. Okay? Just says you have a $20 million verdict. What is the story behind it? Did the insurance company offer 3 nickels and then you went to trial and got 20 million? Mm-hmm. Who was the person behind it? Did they have a family? What were the long-term consequences of that injury? I think those stories, that is what makes something interesting. A verdict for 20 million, by itself may be an interesting story, but stories involve people and emotions and not just cold hard numbers. And I think, especially for us, we're in a business and industry that requires storytelling. Mm-hmm. And you see, on the news, in quotes, on TV, but it doesn't, you never see a story they got a $20 million verdict. The end. Yeah. It's a story. What is the information, the facts behind it that make it unique, interesting, and something that will pull at people? And I think that's what people also want in their lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we like to talk to plaintiffs all the time and get the personal story behind what's going on in a case, rather than just this is what happened. So I like that. And
Hannah, you can talk, probably attest this. None of these plaintiffs go into these cases being I want $20 million. Or if they got that verdict, they're not I got $20 million. Hooray. I mean, they've gone through like the worst thing in their life imaginable.
Yeah.
They aren't at the end of the day thinking, oh, I got $20 million. They're thinking, okay, how do I now piece my life back together when I am like, an amputee or I had the death of a loved one? I just think that when a lawyer really focuses on, again, it may attract a certain kind of client, but, in our experiences, when we talk with, the clients of these law firms day in and day out, they're not looking for a number. I mean, they're looking for peace, be created whole, move on with their life. And I just think, I don't know what the dollar number speaks to at the end of the day.
Yeah. They're angry, sad. They don't want this to happen to other people. That's the main thing we hear from all of our plaintiffs that we work with is, I don't want this to happen to anyone else. How do I make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else? And a lot of the times bringing the legal case, talking about it in the public, that sort of thing is, hopefully what pushes change. So that's definitely what I hear. Nothing about the money other than being made whole again from whatever they experienced. So yeah, I definitely agree. You mentioned a little bit ago, there's lots of different ways people are getting their media. I'm a podcast junkie. I don't watch as much traditional TV media anymore. Why do you think, or do you think, that traditional media, the New York Times, the big newspapers, the TV, CNN and all the big outlets, are they still important? Do we still need to go to them, or should people just be on podcasts more? Should they be on social media, posting videos? What do you think about that?
There's kind of like multiple answers there. First, I think you kind of need to be everywhere, but also you have to be where your audience is. And if you look at like the national nightly news, which used to, decades ago get tens of millions of people watching every night, those days are long over. But still, multiple millions of people watch the nightly news. And I think there is just a discrediting of that information source that is done at your own peril. Also, local TV. Your local TV broadcast, the numbers may not be huge, but it's a huge percentage of your community. And those numbers really matter and we've seen time again where a lawyer is on local TV, their local paper, and that drives more potential clients contacting them. Now, that doesn't mean you're also not appearing on a podcast or engaging maybe in legal publications that could be seen by referral sources. There's just not a silver bullet or one size fits all, but I think there is always this bias for people to go to the shiny new toy. Okay. Podcast, TikTok. When I think there are plenty of places where there are a million people, multiple millions of people still viewing it. Now, I would just say, let's say you're working on something and you have an audience of 1, an audience of 10. Like, is being on, let's say, CNN, okay, let's say they have like 100,000, 200,000 people watching it. Or the 10 people you care about, are they watching that? If not, then you have to figure out what the goal is and where your audience is. But look, that's, again, I'm not saying all this to dismiss the importance of podcasts or social media, but I think the pendulum has gone too far in one direction when you're missing, I think, the boat of where, a lot of still trust and eyeballs are.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we talk with our firms that we work with and clients that we work with about matching the image of your firm and your types of cases and what makes sense for you. Some lawyers are going to be great TikTok personalities and actually get a good message across and look good and can sound good on TikTok. Some don't. Some it doesn't make any sense. So do you have any thoughts on how you match your image and your firm's brand to different sorts of media? Is there certain types of cases that work well in big newspapers, on TV, that sort of thing?
I think people can smell inauthenticity from like a mile away.
Yeah.
And, like if I were to be like a TikTok influencer, it would be like completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is not just not who I am. Nothing against people who have that in them. But I think whatever you do in your law practice or in life, quite honestly, it has to be authentic to who you are. Because when a potential client sees, a lawyer, okay, they got to be able to feel a connection to them and feel like, importantly, they can trust them. And trust, and we've done some polling on this, that is like the number one factor for people in all walks of life, particularly when they feel like, basic institutions like our government have failed them. And they want to know who they can trust. And if you're engaging in a way that doesn't put trust forward, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So now I guess to go back to your other question, like, does this story lend itself for X, Y, or Z? I think the other thing to keep in mind is people are like, oh, it's on, everyone gets their news. They'll say their news from social media. I feel like now every time I use the word news, it's kind of loaded.
Yeah.
But where do you think these social media people get that information from?
Yeah.
They're getting it from mainstream news sources and then repurposing it. So a lot of stuff that ends up on social media is due to the fact that it was in a more mainstream outlet and they're reworking it, giving their own take on it. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that there are not social media influencers that can break their own news, but it's much less often than, your more sort of traditional, quote unquote, news outlets.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's a whole new world of media. A little bit shifting. Another area that we work on quite often is with legal trades and legal media. Some lawyers really like it, Law360, Law.com. Some lawyers don't see the value in it. Do you think it's a mistake to ignore the legal trades? Do you think we should be targeting them more? Why do some lawyers dismiss it? Why do some really love it? What do you think about those?
Yeah. I can't speak for every lawyer why they dismiss it. I think a lot of times, like, some of these outlets pick up on a filing, like it'll be on a case that like no one has known about for 3 years, and all of a sudden like Law360 calls about some like response to a motion to dismiss, and they're like, why now? Like, what? And it's just like an oddity of it. But okay, should you care about them? You have to think about who is reading these outlets, and it's other lawyers and judges. Do you care what other lawyers and judges think about you and your reputation? If the answer is no, then okay, then maybe you shouldn't care about a Law.com or a Bloomberg Law or a Reuters Legal or a Law360. I suspect you do and should care about what judges and other lawyers, particularly referring attorneys, think about you and your practice. And I think not engaging on those is you do so at your own peril. There is a lot of value there. And another thing to consider is a lot of times Law.com or Law360 or Reuters, I don't want to leave anyone out, Bloomberg Law, they are breaking news. And like the New York Times will pick up a story because it was in Law360 first.
Yeah.
Because New York Times is in the business of tracking thousands of dockets. Law360 is. And they'll often see something, report on something that then gets sort of run up the ladder. Yeah. The fact that it's just, it may just be a Law360 story, it has the potential to become a lot bigger than that. I think engaging in those areas is really important. And again, there's not, I'm not big on giving blanket statements. It always depends. But I would not minimize their reach and impact, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's some really great Law360, Law.com, Bloomberg, all of those reporters who we talk to frequently, and they cover interesting stuff, and they write good stories, and then lead us down a path that we didn't know we could go down. But and then we get connected with lots of reporters, so it is an interesting area. Well, something that was covered in the New York Times recently was the Dragon Lawyer saga, which I know, there was a lot of discussion internally at Rebuttal about, the value of this, putting if people aren't familiar, a lawyer put their logo on a bunch of filings, and it's a huge dragon, and got a bunch of attention for their filings, and the court threw it out pretty much, saying, this is outrageous and you shouldn't be promoting your firm as a part of your legal filings. I know you'll have strong opinions on this. Can you give us your thoughts about Dragon Lawyer and what that kind of reveals about marketing and advertising for lawyers today?
Yeah. I actually probably wouldn't have had a strong opinion on this, but I heard from other people in like the legal business/marketing world that were like, oh, this was a good thing. It's good advertising for this lawyer. And like my head exploded. Okay. The idea of being a lawyer isn't to get more cases. It is to serve your clients.
Yeah.
Okay. How was this client served by this when the case got dismissed and the judge, like, I can't imagine the judge views this lawyer very highly. And like they put their logo, I guess it's like a watermark on every page of their filing. And again, there were some people in legal marketing who were like, oh, like all press is good press. No, it's not.
No,
like,
it's not.
no, that is not true. This person did a disservice to their client. Okay? Now, again, maybe there is a type of client that will now be attracted to this lawyer. I don't think there's many of them. When this lawyer made it about themselves in some ways and not about doing the best for their client, I just can't imagine why anyone would think that is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't even know what the case was, right? None of the coverage was about what the actual case or the client was. I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you. It was just about this marketing ploy that they used. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know. Your case is thrown out and nobody even knows about it, right?
And who was going to see this filing? Opposing counsel.
Yep.
The judge and the judge's clerks. Was the lawyer marketing? It makes, and look, like the New York Times covered it. I mean, it was like, oh, I got in the New York Times. That is not a good thing. Okay. Like again, I don't even know why it's even a saying. Not all press is good press. I mean, we can go through plenty of people who have been in the news and it's not for good things. And like,
yeah. Well, definitely frustrating, but also an interesting PR marketing topic to discuss internally. Okay, I have a couple quick, rapid fire questions for you to give your hot take on, which we've covered a few of them, but I want your kind of quick answers. So, legal TikTok, smart or cringy?
I think it's mostly cringe, but I think for some lawyers it may work for them, but I think it's a bit cringe. But again, it depends on what market you're in, and I think most of TikTok's cringe, but you know what? I also say good on those lawyers for getting out there in a way. They're trying something different, and I think there's something to be celebrated for that. And hey, there's clients that we work with and help them do TikToks, but it's on brand. I think there's a lot of lawyers who are doing it, and it's not on brand. And cringe.
Yeah. Should lawyers be on Reddit? If so, what should they be on Reddit for?
Reddit is interesting. So like I try to stay off social media because I think it's it can be like a toxic hellscape. Reddit I love though. And I think Reddit, I'm not sure if it's going to like help a lawyer find clients, but I think it actually helps to stay on the cutting edge of some stuff and to learn from others in a community. Think about it as a community, like a networking event, going to like a bar event, reading, there's a lawyer's subreddit that I look at. There's ones on like technology I like to look at. I think there are interesting elements for anyone who's running a business to learn from other people. Again, to be commenting on legal matters, though, I think is probably not the safest bet or the best use of your time.
Yeah.
Are you on Reddit, Hannah?
A little bit, sometimes, but not as much as you, I don't think.
Well, I just learned a couple days ago you have a Substack, so... Yeah.
Well, top secret information being revealed, but yes.
Hannah's top secret Substack.
All right. I have strong opinions about this one. Is SEO dead? Was it ever important?
It's not dead. I think SEO, it's very much misunderstood. And I think like anywhere else, there's good PR practitioners and there's good SEO practitioners, and there's a sea of bad ones. I think, the algorithm's a black box, and for folks who think they've like had this, say they have this secret sauce, I think is like silly. I think what is important is putting out useful information for people and networking in the appropriate and right circles to reach your audience. And I think a lot of that gets you like 80% of the way there.
Yeah.
But honestly, a lot of law firms can't get 80% of the way there. I think, something we know, a lot of law firms are run by amazing lawyers who don't know a lot about a business or marketing their business. I think a lot of, and again, I don't want to dismiss some really good SEO practitioners out there, but I think the whole field's been soiled by a lot of really bad ones. And also the future of SEO, I think, is very much up in the air with AI. And I've been seeing out there, oh, like we can trick your. This was supposed to be a quick take. Whoops. Yeah, I'm just going. Well, you're like, oh, like, there's ways we can, trick your SEO to come up in AI. Like that is a bunch of like nonsense that makes like they're coming out with new models every 3 weeks, and we have no idea what they're training the models on. Like, give me a break. So
how are we optimizing if we don't know what we're optimizing for? I don't know.
But I think it actually underscores, like, if you have every law firm under the sun doing SEO, okay, what distinguishes your firm from everyone else? And again, we talked about storytelling before, and I think that's a huge. Like, what are you doing in your community? And think of community not in the strict sense of your geography, but of the audiences and people that should care about you and your firm, and how are you reaching them? And I think that is a much better idea. It's not as easy as just saying, go do my SEO. You have to, like, think through, okay, here are my audiences. Here's the places they congregate. How do I reach out to them? But I think at the end of the day, it helps build a brand and a community of people and ambassadors that will have a much longer lasting impact on your firm and its success than trying to capitalize on the SEO trick of the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had a few more, but I kind of liked that as an ending statement from you.
I want to know, like, what do you like leaving in the bank?
Well,
like,
I mean, we could do a couple more of these episodes, and
I guess, yeah. Hey, Hannah, what in the world of legal and PR, what's been your bugaboo of late? What is it that's driving you nuts?
I listen to tons of podcasts all the time. My biggest obsession recently has been, these pollution and environmental dramas that are going on around the country. There's lots of legal cases about, I don't even know, PFAS and all this other stuff. But I listen to tons of podcasts just about local towns that are feeling the effects of climate change, and I don't know the legal avenues there, but that's been my obsession recently, and I listen to lots. I'm the podcast guru, and I listen to lots of those. So I'm hoping someday, people will start paying attention to the climate a little bit more, and we'll get some PR for that part of the world. But for now, I'll listen to my podcasts and hopefully come back to this one.
I think a space to watch, especially on podcasts, is the monetization of them. And there's more sponsorships than ever, but the bar of entry for a podcast is really low. Yeah. I mean, we started a podcast and we're just doing it, and we don't have any sponsors. There's no, I'm not like slinging I don't know, like mattresses or anything, or meal services.
Yeah.
But they are amazing at storytelling. But also, I wonder if they're going to suffer the same fate as, the news industry, where these are expensive stories to tell, but they're also important ones to tell. But again, the fact that there's really no barrier to entry, I think makes it a great way for people who want to be storytellers to enter the space. So,
yeah, it's long form, lots of time to take, and time's expensive, but also I think it's important to tell these kind of stories in a long form way. So yeah, I love the podcast world, and thanks for letting me take over your host position today. Hopefully we'll do.
You did pretty good, Hannah, as a first-time podcast host. You should do this more often.
Yeah, we should. All right.
Yeah.
It's good to meet.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening to the latest edition of Raising the Bar with Rebuttal PR. I'm Ray DiLorenzi. Thanks again to Hannah Gallagher for stepping in as the host, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Raising the Bar with Rebuttal PR. Don't forget to subscribe and follow to join us next time. See you then.